All right, in this lesson, we're going to look at percents and just develop using some benchmark percents to calculate any whole percentage number. And to start this out, just understand the benchmark percent is a percent that's commonly used, such as 1%, 5%, 10%, 25%, 50%, 100%. And we can pretty easily calculate each one of these, so in doing that, it allows us to basically come up with any whole percent of a number, because say you want to do 52%, you figure out what 50% is, and then you figure out what 1% is, and you put this on twice, and you have 52. So in order to do this, though, we have to kind of analyze some relationships here. So throughout the video, if you want to pause and answer each thing and then compare to what I do, that's great. If you just want to listen and take down some notes, that's also great too. So how is 50% related to 100%? So when I see this, I think that it's half. It is half. All right. So then I think, how is 25% related to 100%? How is 25% related to 50%? So the way I would answer that is that 25% is 1/4 of 100%. 25% is 1/4 of 100%, just like 25 cents is 1/4 of $1, right? And half of 50%, just like 1/4 is half of 50 cents. So that's kind of how I think about that one. The next two kind of look at how is 10% related to 100%, and how is 10% related to 50%, and then saying how is 5% related to 10%. So let's look at these. So in looking at the next problem, I realized something. How is 10% related to 100%? Well, 10% is 1/10 of 100, but I also know that if I take 100 and divide it by 10, I get 10%. And I said 10% is 1/5 of 50, because 10 times 5 is 50. But I thought if I divide by 5, if I take the 50% and divide by 5, I get 10%. And then I thought about that up here too. 25% is 1/4 of 100, so if I take 100 and divide it by 4, yeah, I get 25. And if I take the 50 and I divide it by 2, I get 25. So if you can figure out like a 50% or 100%, you can just divide it by the given number you need to get to the other percent. And now I say, how is 5% related to 10%? And now I can see that 5% is 1/2 of 10%, or 10% divided by 2 would give me 5%. This next one is how I would figure out 1%. How is 1% related to 10%? How is 1% related to 5%? So what I wrote down here is that 1% is 1/10 of 10%, or it's 10% divided by 10. So if I have a figure for 10%, if I divide that by 10, I'll have what 1% is. And 1% is 1/5 of 5%, or 5% divided by 5. So again, if I can calculate 5%, if I divide that by 5, I get to 1%. So here are some practice problems. You can pause and go through, or I'm going to pause and actually just fill them all in and then talk about my thought process in solving these percents mentally and how I did that. All right, so I'm going to solve these live. So 100% is of $300 is $300. It's the whole thing. B says 1% of $300. So I'm actually going to skip this, because for me to do 1%, I want to be down to 10%. So let me get down to E first, and then I'll figure out B. So 50% of $300 would just be half of that. So half of 300 would be 300 divided by 2 is $150. And then 10% would be 300 divided by 10. So I just divide this by 10, which I know just means move the decimal point over 1 to the left when I divide by 10. So that would be $30. Right, $30, okay? And then I divide this by 10, which again moves the decimal 1 to the left to get to 1%, and divide that, and I would get $3. So 1% would be $3. 25% would be 2 tens and a 5, or half of 50. I don't know what 150 divided by 2 is right now, so I'm going to skip this, because I'm trying to do this mentally, not with a calculator. 5% of 300 would be half of 30. So I take 30, I divide it by 2, I know that one. That would be $15. Now I can take 5, 15, take this, add it to 2 tens. So 30 plus 30 is 60, plus another 15 would be 75. So $25 is 75. Oh my goodness, how could I not I know that $75 is half of 150. I guess my brain just wasn't thinking that. But now I see it this way, I have all of them calculated mentally. So this next part is just looking at strategies you can use to calculate any whole percent in your head by doing 10, 5, and 1%. So you can use 10, 5, and 1% to determine each percent given, explaining your reasoning. How can you calculate 18% of a number? How can you calculate 25% of a number? So for the first one way to do it is I would calculate 10% twice, so I end up with 20%, kind of like 10% plus 10%, right? And then I'd do 1% from the 10%, and then I would subtract. So I'd have 20%, and I'd take away 1% twice, so I'd get 20 minus 2 is 18%. How would you calculate 25% of a number? So for this one, I would do 10% plus 10% plus 5%. So I calculate 10%, and then I take half of that to get 5%. I'd add the 10% in twice to get 20, and then the 5 to get 25. So for this next one, I kind of simplified how I wrote it. I kind of ran out of space here too. So I would start with 37%, 10%, 10%, 10%. So I have 30. Then I would take half of my 10%, figure out 5%, add that in. Now I'm at 35%, and then I'd use my 10% to figure out 1%, and then do 1% plus 1%, and now I have 37. 10, 20, 30, 5, 6, 7, 37%. So here's like a practical situation where we're doing 12%. About 12% of the U.S. population is left-handed. Estimate how many left-handed students are in a class of 100. So this one's pretty easy to estimate because when you have 100, it's pretty straightforward. Your 10% you do 10% plus 1% plus 1%. 10% of 100 is 10. You just divide by 10 and then divide 10% by 10, so that would be 1 plus 1 equals 12. Coincidentally, whenever you have 100, your percentage is just 12. Your percentage, like that's what percent is out of 100, right? So that's why this is the number of students. Now, knowing this, all I have to really do is just double it, because 200 is times 2, so I can just double the 12, and I should get 24. Right? How would I do that with percents? Well, I would do 10% plus 1% plus 1%. We're going to be doing that same thing because every time we're trying to get to 12%. 10% of 200, just move your decimal by dividing by 10 is 20. And then 1% would be 2, and 1% again would be 2, because just move this decimal over to get 2 by dividing by 10 twice. And we end up with 24. That was what I predicted. 150 students, now that's a little bit different. The way to do it with your percents would be 10% plus 1% again, plus 1%. All right. And then 10% of 150 would be 15, and then 1% would be move your decimal over by dividing by 10 again, would be 1.5. So you end up with 15 plus 1.5 plus 1.5. 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3, plus 15 equals 18. There's another way that you could do the 150 using what you have already. You know that 100 and 200 are, right? Well, if you add them together, you get 300. So 100 plus 200 is 300, so 24 plus 12. You add these together. 24 plus 12. 24 plus 12 is 36, but then that's for 300 people, so you have to divide it by 2, and dividing it by 2 gives you 18, and that's what we got there, because 300 divided by 2 is 150, so 36 divided by 2 is 18. And again, these are just all ways that you can use mental math to calculate percents.